Guys, full disclosure, I wouldn't be a big Keir Starmer guy, you know. How am I going to describe him to you? Like, if you're outside Britain and Ireland, say, you've no sense of him at all. Do you know the way on a hot summer's day, your thighs can start to kind of pop off each other? Like, I mean, I'm getting a little bit older and I'm putting on a few pounds. I could be going for just a kind of a frolic, you know, a playful frolic in the countryside, or a little, stroll or a stretch on the beach, and I'm finding that my thighs are kind of chafing a little bit. You know, that redness on a hot summer's day on your thighs, and then say like the sand might get in to that kind of moist red between your thighs that have chafed. If that were a person, that would be Keir Starmer. Just a kind of a pointless, unpleasant irritation. His only discernible, I would say, skill or kind of ability at all is that he somehow manages to kind of annoy everyone. So if you're on the right in British politics, on the left, if you're pro-Palestine, if you're kind of against Palestine and obviously any human being having any rights at all, you'll somehow just all agree like, geez, Keir Starmer is a bit of a wet week, like. But in his, I suppose you would describe it, conditional proposed recognition of the Palestinian state, he has somehow managed to really outdo himself. Let's take a look-see.
On the 7th of October 2023, Hamas perpetrated the worst massacre in Israel's history. Every day since then, the horror has continued. The hostages are still being held today.
I mean, I think it's quite extraordinary that you would be about to announce the potential recognition of a Palestinian state, and your first 3 or 4 comments are about October 7th, Hamas, and Israeli hostages. But I mean, I think you're about to recognize a Palestinian state. No, it's really weird that Palestine is framed only through the prism of Israeli suffering, isn't it? It's mad. No mention at all, of course, of the thousands of Palestinian hostages, many of them children, still languishing as we speak in Israeli dungeons.
The Palestinian people have endured terrible suffering.
Interesting euphemism for a genocide, terrible suffering.
Now in Gaza, because of a catastrophic failure of aid.
Whoa! Have you ever come across this before, guys? Aid, I mean, we're talking flour, pasta, medicine. Aid has actually now garnered a kind of agency, and it is at fault for the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Not Israel. Israel isn't even present on the table as we're kind of compiling the who did what. It's actually aid. It's a catastrophic failure of aid. Like, fair play to aid.
We see starving babies, children too weak to stand. Images that will stay with us for a lifetime.
Images that you co-created because of your sycophantic, immoral obsession and dedication to the rogue state of Israel.
The suffering must end. Yesterday, I discussed this with President Trump, and we're mounting a major effort to get humanitarian supplies back in by air. And UK aid has been airdropped into Gaza today, and crucially, by land.
Absolutely extraordinary to me that Keir Starmer or any leader anywhere could speak about airdropping aid into the Gaza Strip and keep a straight face, to be able to look at journalists in the face and kind of feel proud that you're dropping aid from the air when it is notoriously dangerous, when it is notoriously ineffective and expensive, and you're putting that forward as the solution when you could just pressure your allies, Israel, to grow a soul and open the bloody gates and let the aid in. Not to mention how dehumanizing it is to drop aid from the sky on starving, emaciated, traumatized people. If the aid doesn't kill them, they are left in a kind of a Hunger Games scenario where they will inevitably have to battle each other for these insufficient scraps of aid to try and treat their emaciated family members who may already be too far gone. Like, the absolute abject immorality of speaking about airdrops with gusto.
We need to see at least 500 trucks entering Gaza every day. But ultimately, the only way to bring this humanitarian crisis to an end is through a long-term settlement.
Like, that one is just a pure logical mess. The only way to bring this particular humanitarian crisis to an end is a long-term settlement. Like, this particular humanitarian crisis is engineered by Israel. So the way you stop this humanitarian crisis right now is you stop sending them arms. You stop providing them with diplomatic cover. You stop going on about October 7th and Hamas at the beginning of a speech about recognizing the Palestinian state. You stop being Israel and the US's little gopher, their little doggy. That's what you do. You grow a pair of balls. That's what you should do. Not this proposed long-term peace settlement of a two-state solution that you know, and we all know, is laughable right now.
So we are supporting the US, Egyptian and Qatari efforts to secure a vital ceasefire. That ceasefire must be sustainable, and it must lead to a wider peace plan, which we're developing with our international partners. This plan will deliver security and proper governance in Gaza and pave the way for negotiations on a two-state solution. Our goal remains a safe and secure Israel alongside a viable and sovereign Palestinian state. But right now, that goal is under pressure like never before.
But why, Keir Starmer? Why is the goal of, like, let's park for a moment what a nonsense the two-state solution is now? I mean, arguably, it was always fanciful as long as the settlements kept increasing in the West Bank. But no, it's an absolute laughingstock. But why doesn't Keir Starmer outline why the two-state solution is under such pressure now? I mean, the dogs on my street know that it's under so much pressure right now because the Israelis have obliterated Gaza, made it unlivable, and the rates of new settlements in the West Bank are through the roof. But will he say that? No, because again, we have this almost obsession with absolving Israel from any blame in the nightmare, in the genocide that they are doing now with his diplomatic support and weapons.
I've always said that we will recognise a Palestinian state as a contribution to a proper peace process at the moment of maximum impact for the two-state solution. With that solution now under threat, this is the moment to act.
It's just such a nonsense, right? But just on this one level, imagine announcing the recognition of a state whilst you're still arming to the teeth the country currently trying to obliterate that state. It's like a sick joke.
I can confirm the UK will recognise the state of Palestine by the United Nations General Assembly in September.
So if your television had turned itself off at this point, you'd have gone down the pub and you would have been saying, oh, you know, Britain's recognising Palestine there now in September. That's significant. And I mean, it is. On paper, it is definitely reasonably significant because after all, Keir Starmer has said, I can confirm I will do this in September. But then in a confusing moment, I think for syntax, really, he follows it up with this kind of bizarre condition. I genuinely have never seen such weird diplomatic hoop jumping, tying yourself up in knots, this weird conditional promise of recognition of a state that nobody knows where that state would be right now at this moment has somehow managed to just gather everyone together to say this is ridiculous. You know, people on the left and people on the right, they're just kind of crawling over each other to try and go, whatever else we disagree on, we can agree that that man is a mess.
I can confirm the UK will recognise the state of Palestine by the United Nations General Assembly in September unless the Israeli government takes substantive steps to end the appalling situation in Gaza, agree to a ceasefire, and commit to a long-term sustainable peace, reviving the prospect of a two-state solution.
This, for me, stands out as just the nadir of this weird little piece from Starmer to kind of characterize the recognition of Palestinian statehood as a kind of a bargaining chip. I think, as others have said, if our disgusting little psychopathic ally doesn't stop killing people, 100 a day minimum and starving people to death, we might actually recognize that crazy state over there. We might go that far and recognize that crazy brown country that's kind of prone to terrorism over there. So you better be careful, Israel. Stop killing so many kids. We don't want to see images of that on the front cover of the Daily Express anymore. It's reducing it to this kind of weird little game. How horribly dehumanizing for Palestinians to have the recognition of a historic, beautiful country, rich in tradition and culture, that we all know exists, that has always existed, that was colonized, that was outlined as somewhere that the Zionists were aiming and then went through with this colonization throughout the 20th century, to reduce that rich tradition to, as I say, this kind of bargaining chip in this weird geopolitical game that Starmer's playing to try and keep the 250 plus MPs that are knocking on his door demanding Palestinian statehood happy, and also, I suppose, cynically from his perspective, one eye on Jeremy Corbyn's new party, which is gaining so much traction. It's obviously an existential threat to Starmer's Labour. To reduce Palestine to this conditional, flimsy offer of statehood, I think is just absolutely abhorrent, especially from the country that kickstarted all this horror, all this murder and mayhem and endless conflict and ultimately genocide for the Palestinians, namely Britain and its duplicity in the Sykes-Picot Agreement. Britain's historic responsibility to Palestine is untouched. There's no country owes the Palestinian people more right now, I would argue, than the British. And for this flimsy, really insulting, conditional offer of a Palestinian statehood, I took a cursory glance online today and I spoke to my Palestinian friends. I don't know any Palestinian who is anyway remotely excited at the idea of Starmer proposing what will undoubtedly be some half-hearted Palestinian Authority-led Palestine state. I don't know anyone who's excited by that. What they would be enthusiastic about, what they would be relieved about, surely would be for you to stop sending the people who are committing genocide against them the weapons to do it.
And this includes allowing the UN to restart the supply of aid and making clear that there will be no annexations in the West Bank.
That's the threat to Israel there. That's as tough as Keir Starmer gets to a country that most human rights organisations at this point now, even the ones in Israel, even B'Tselem have come out and said is committing genocide. That's as tough as Keir Starmer says. Please don't annex the West Bank. He doesn't say anything about the settlements. Or like continue, with the ever encroaching settlements. Do that all you want, as you always have. But please don't announce to the world that you're actually annexing the West Bank, because then that'll undermine our pissy two-state solution nonsense. So that's his finger wagging at Israel done and dusted. Let's have a look at what he says to Palestinians, what they'll have to do in order to get his special little recognition of the Palestinian state.
Our message to the terrorists of Hamas is unchanged and unequivocal. They must immediately release all of the hostages, sign up to a ceasefire, disarm, and accept that they will play no part in the government of Gaza.
Imagine being Hamas listening to this, okay, so in order to get your pissy state led by, I would assume, Abbas, we have to stop fighting back against the people committing genocide against our people, give you our arms, and allow themselves to be absolutely obliterated by these psychopaths in order to get the prize of a nonsense state from Britain.
And we'll make an assessment in September on how far the parties have met these steps. But no one should have a veto over our decision. So this is the way forward. We will keep working with all our international partners to end the suffering, get aid flooding into Gaza, and deliver a more stable future for the Middle East. because I know that is what the British people desperately want to see.
Prime Minister, two issues here, obviously the aid and also the recognition of Palestine. First of all, on aid, what assurances did you receive from President Trump that he will use his influence with Prime Minister Netanyahu to allow the aid that you've talked about, the aid going in by trucks as well as by air? What assurance did you receive from him? He sounded as though when he talked about every ounce of food going in and you can't fake the pictures that we've seen on TV. Tell me about the reassurances you've heard, the promises, pledges from President Trump.
Like, he just would not instill you with confidence, this man. Sure, he wouldn't. He's up and down at the notes. He's taking out the pen, the biro out the side of the jacket. It's not working. He's kind of carrying on like a fella who we would say in Ireland, his nerves are at him, like maybe an older lad in a post office who just realised that he can't give you a receipt and he has a total breakdown. Like, this is what Britain is kind of putting out to the world to represent it these days. What's so frustrating about the man is I find myself agreeing with Tories for the first time in my life. Like, the Tories are gathering together to kind of say this man just lacks the charisma on a basic level to represent us. And like, I kind of agree.
You do appear to have moved your position from as recently as last week, really, where you were talking about various other measures. What has influenced you into making what looks like a U-turn here on this issue? Is it pressure from the 250 or so MPs, most of whom are Labour? Is it pressure from inside your cabinet? We hear there are 7 cabinet ministers pressing you to push for recognising Palestine. Is it President Macron, who, of course, lobbied you? He talked about it last Thursday about recognising the Palestine also at the UN General Assembly. And what difference do you think actually recognising Palestine will actually make in practical terms?
Thank you for those questions. Firstly, on the question of aid, I won't go into the discussions I had with President Trump yesterday. We had a long session.
That's because he doesn't respect you and he probably mocked you to your face for the whole lot of the chat, Keir, buddy.
And we discussed the situation in Gaza, and you heard the way the president then put it in the press conference that we held afterwards. And I think you could see for yourself his concern about the humanitarian situation in Gaza, as is my concern, because we've been saying for some considerable time now, we need to get more aid in at volume and at speed. And the situation now is absolutely catastrophic, which is why I've taken this decision today. In relation to the two-state solution and the recognition of Palestine, this has been long-standing Labour Party policy. It was in our manifesto. We talked about the right of the Palestinians to recognition. And we've always said that would be part of the process. And that it would be an important part of the point that we thought it would have maximum impact. It's driven today by two things. Firstly, the context in the intolerable situation in Gaza, which is getting worse by the day, but also because of the concern that the very possibility of a two-state solution is reducing. And therefore, it is very important to be seen in that context as a very important contribution to what I hope will be an alleviation of the situation on the ground, because I'm acutely aware that what needs to happen urgently is that aid into Gaza at speed and at volume, and that ceasefire that can open the way for a political process. So this is a decision taken by this government in the context of today, and after a meeting with my cabinet just earlier this afternoon.
It's really quite extraordinary for a man to say so much and yet say so little.
The reason we have announced this in the way we have in relation to the General Assembly in September is precisely because I want to ensure that this plays a part in changing the conditions on the ground and making sure that that aid gets in, making sure that there is hope of a two-state solution for the future. And therefore, I've always been interested in what is going to make a material difference. How can we work with our allies most effectively? And that's why this comes as a part of a peace plan that we've been working on for some considerable time, an 8-part plan, which I've already spoken to Germany and France about and many other countries. So this should be in the context of answering the question, yes, how do you get humanitarian aid in at speed and at volume, but also what happens the day after a much-needed ceasefire so that we can get to a long-term peaceful outcome. And I think that that is the context in which you should see the decision that I've made today.
So there you have it, folks. A kind of a recognition from Keir Starmer there that this proposed recognition of a Palestinian state is nothing more than a little bit of goading to the rogue psychopathic state, gently telling them, you better stop killing all those babies, or certainly, make it a little fewer, or we might just recognize Palestine. Now, what absolutely blows my mind is, how could you be a dedicated proponent of the two-state solution nonsense when what you're saying here is you will only recognize one of the states if the state that you support doesn't stop committing genocide? So how could you propose this two-state solution when your recognition of one of the states is only a kind of a bargaining chip? It's only a threat, really, at best a threat against your psychopathic ally. This is just one of the many logical fallacies with this, as I say, deeply absurd theatrical performance from Keir Starmer. And I will just leave you with this thought. A lot of the commentary from right-wingers about this proposed recognition of a Palestinian state focuses on the idea that this would be a reward for Hamas. Recognizing a Palestinian state would effectively be saying that October 7th was great and Hamas has won. But nobody ever that I've seen says asking Hamas to disarm, asking Hamas to basically give up and allow whatever's left of their people and their country to be obliterated, wouldn't that be a reward for Israel's genocide? Wouldn't that be a reward for Israel's ethnic cleansing? Nobody ever seems to characterize Hamas giving up, whatever that means, and leaving the strip as being anything other than a kind of an affirmation and acknowledgement that Israel's master plan of absolute obliteration of the region of the strip has been successful. It is the Hamas fighters in Gaza right now, after all, that are effectively the only thing that stands between Israel and the total annihilation and extermination of the Palestinian people. It's certainly nothing that the West is doing. The West has either largely looked the other way or provided the money, the weapons and the diplomatic cover for Israel to carry out this 21st century Holocaust. And so this conditional proposed recognition of a Palestinian state is very much on brand for Keir Starmer insofar as it means nothing. It's not very well outlined. Nobody's enthusiastic about it. And it's hard to see how any thinking or reasoning behind it has the Palestinian people's welfare in mind at all. As I say, I don't know a single Palestinian who's encouraged by it. They all just want to see Keir Starmer stop aiding and abetting the genocidal war machine. That would be significant. That would be tangible differences on the ground, to use his own terminology. And frankly, for Keir Starmer, the leader of Britain, the country that owes Palestine more than any other country on earth, to reduce the well overdue recognition of the state to this kind of pathetic goading of Israel to use Palestine as a kind of a bargaining chip is just says so much about how the colonial Orientalist mindset is still very much alive and well in Britain today. Thank you so much for watching. Please support my work on Patreon if you can. See you next time.